Hi everyone, good morning. Welcome back to my channel. My name is Julia if you're new. This morning I am going to attempt a project that should be relatively easy. It's something I've been wanting to do for a very long time and actually planning to do for a while as well. I'm going to be attempting to make my very own homemade chicken stock. The past few times we have had rotisserie chicken for dinner, I have saved the carcass with the meat that's left and the bones, and I put those in our little deep freezer. And today I am finally hoping to tackle this project. I'm not going to be canning this broth because I don't have a pressure canner, and broth is not able to be canned in a water bath canner. However, I do have like deli containers, like the little plastic takeout containers. So I'm planning to fill those and then freeze them. That way I'll have broth in like little 2-cup containers, just like if I was gonna have broth in a can, and we can take them out and thaw them as we need them. I do think ideally I would be able to can these so that they wouldn't be taking up freezer space. But at this point in my life, I do not have a pressure canner. I am not interested in taking on pressure canning as a skill right now. It's something that I hope to learn someday, but we do have extra freezer space, more freezer space than we've ever had since we got our like compact deep freezer. So that is the plan, to just utilize the resources that we have and hopefully get something delicious out of it. So like I said, the past few times we've had rotisserie chicken, I have just put the carcass, like what's left of the meat and the bones, into a freezer bag. I think there are 3 carcasses in here, but I'm going to probably just use 2. I want to get as much broth as I can, so I'm filling my pot. I already have my pot filled with like, I don't know, 10 quarts of water or something like that. I might have to take some water out, but I think putting 2 carcasses in that will probably be the right amount. Also, I apologize for saying the word carcass so much. That's just what it is. I don't know another way to say it, but chicken bones, the leftover chicken bits from the rotisserie chicken. How's that? So I'm going to see what makes sense. We do have some elastic that's frozen into this. I probably should have taken this out before we put it in the freezer, but I actually think I'm not going to stress too much about it, and I'm just going to get it in there with the elastic still on, and once everything gets nice and loose, I'll be able to just pluck those right out, and that shouldn't take long as soon as everything starts to defrost. So let's see. I'm going to put this last one back in the freezer, and that'll go towards the next batch of broth. There's a few more items that are going to go into this broth to give it extra flavor. I have some carrots that honestly maybe have seen better days, but this will actually be a perfect use for them. I just gave those a good wash, and I'm not even gonna worry about peeling them. This is just for flavor, but I will chop into a few pieces just to like increase the surface area. I'm also gonna put in a couple ribs of celery. I'm gonna cut off the very ends, but I'm actually gonna leave on the greens. Again, it just is gonna impart more flavor. Okay, I am looking at this, and I think I'm gonna take a little bit of the liquid out. I'm going to take an onion and quarter it. Ooh, that onion is getting me. Yeah. Oh, that onion really got me. Oh. Finally, I'm just gonna put in a few sprigs of parsley and a couple of sprigs of fresh thyme. At this stage, that's all that I'm gonna do. I'm not gonna season with salt or pepper or anything like that right now. I'm gonna turn the heat on this burner, and from what I've read, we actually don't wanna boil it, we just want to simmer it. When you boil it, it can make your broth cloudy and I guess greasier, even though I'm not totally sure I understand that because you're supposed to sort of skim the guck and like separate the fat when it's done. But I've never done this before, so I'm gonna trust what I've read and get this going. As soon as it simmers, I'm gonna put my lid on like most of the way, just so that not too much water evaporates. And I'm gonna let this simmer for a few hours, probably like 3 or 4 hours, to try to get that really rich, deep flavor. I am gonna keep an eye on it and make sure that I pull out that elastic as soon as everything is kind of thawed. And yes, like I said, I will go through occasionally, like maybe once or twice an hour, and skim off any like foamy, gross stuff, as well as try to separate some of the fat out. I don't have a fat separator, although the internet told me a good way that you can separate fat using a Ziploc bag. So I am going to attempt that, but we are not there yet. That is quite a ways away. This will take several hours before we get there. So here we go. So I'll put that on high just to get it going, and then I will turn it down once it simmers. In the meantime, I'm gonna get this stuff cleaned up, and then we'll be good to go for the next little while. I just got the counters all clean, but I decided I think I'm just gonna get a loaf of bread going. It is a relatively easy thing to feed to my son for like part of the meal, to give him like, you know, peanut butter or almond butter on bread. He is eating more and more solids. We've been sending him to school with a lot of food, and then he eats dinner when he comes home. So, you know, we're looking for like things to serve him. And because of his egg allergy, there are not a whole lot of store-bought breads that I feel comfortable giving him. Even if eggs are not in the ingredients, many of them say may contain egg, and because we don't know like the severity of his allergy at this point, we are not taking any risk with that. So it just feels safer and better to give him bread that I make at home, and I know that there's no egg contamination. So I'm just gonna throw together the dough for a loaf of bread. This is my crusty no-knead bread recipe. I've made it a million times on my channel, but I will put the very simple recipe in the description down below, and I'll also link a video where I make it on camera as well. This is another recipe that I'm getting started on this morning, but it's gonna take several hours before we see the end result. The broth should be done well in advance of the bread. The bread, you should let it sit and rise for anywhere between 6 and 24 hours. I usually go for the 6-hour mark, but I do want to have this baked up before my son comes home from daycare. So I'll probably 6 or 7 hours, and then I'll bake that off so it has a little bit of time to cool before he comes home for the night. All right, our dough is done. So I'm just gonna put the lid on this, set it aside. I usually let this sit on top of the refrigerator for it to rise and develop gluten over the next 6 hours. And I'll be back as soon as there's something to show you. Things are starting to loosen up in here, so I just pulled out one of the elastics that was on one of those rotisserie chickens, and I'm gonna see if I can grab the other one right now. Yeah, that one is sliding right off. Beautiful. So I'm just gonna toss these in the trash and make sure I'm keeping an eye on this, because it is definitely starting to simmer very, very lightly. And again, I wanna just make sure that if I can avoid having this come to a boil, that's what I do. So yeah, I'm just gonna hang out right next to the stove for a little while and make sure that all of the goodies in that pot are submerged and covered with water. And yeah, just keeping an eye on things. Literally, I looked away for like half a minute and it did come to a big boil. I do think it's okay, because that was only for like a minute, less than a minute, I swear. I like heard it in the background and I wasn't processing, and then I look over and it's boiling. So I just turned my burner way down. And I'm going to, you can see that it's still simmering just a little bit, which is just what we want. And then I'm going to partially cover my pot with the lid just to help limit evaporation. I do know that some evaporation will help to concentrate the flavor, but I don't want all of the liquid to leave this early in the process. It's only just come to a boil, to a simmer, and we've probably got another 3 or more hours before I take this off the stove. So I'm gonna try to preserve as much of that beautiful flavor as I can, but also not let too much liquid evaporate this early on. Okay, it's been a little more than 2 hours, like 2.5 hours. Has it? It doesn't matter. This has been stewing away for a while. The house smells amazing. It smells like chicken soup. Let me show you. So the water has reduced a bit. You can see the ring around the edge of the pot, but that is great. So it's not too low, and the color is getting nice and rich. I have not actually needed to skim it. There isn't that much like nasty stuff floating. It does look just a little bit cloudy, but honestly, I'm not like very concerned about the look of it, especially for my first time making broth. I'm just excited that it seems like it is turning out somewhat. I'm definitely gonna let this go for another couple of hours probably, but I am curious to take a little taste and see what we're working with so far. Remember, there is no salt and no pepper added to this. The rotisserie chickens definitely had a lot of flavor in them, and like, you know, they're cooked in butter or oil or whatever. Okay, it's still very light. The flavor is good, but yeah, we definitely have a ways to go to let this keep going. I might even turn the heat up just a little bit. It is simmering, but I bet we could get it going a little bit stronger. I'm gonna put the lid back on this. Maybe I'll keep it closed all the way actually, and just let it keep going for another couple of hours and see where we are. It's been another 45 minutes or so, and I did just give it another little taste, and I think I'm going to add some salt now. This is just some sea salt. You know, this is quite a lot of liquid in here, so I'm gonna add maybe a tablespoon and a half or something, and just give it a taste and see how that changes things. That definitely makes a big difference. Before, it was just kind of tasting like chicken, and like not flavorful chicken, just like chicken water. But adding the salt gives it a little bit of a more complex flavor, and I think that actually helped bring out the flavors of all the other stuff that's in there, the vegetables and the herbs. At this point, there's definitely some fat that's sitting on the top, which is good to see that that's kind of rendering down. I'll be able to separate that out. And yeah, like I said earlier, it definitely is on the cloudier side, but I am not going to beat myself up over that because this is my very first time making broth, stock, whatever this is. Again, I'm gonna let this go another couple hours, maybe not another couple, maybe I'll check it in 1 more hour. And just in case you're wondering, this is how our bread is looking, the dough. It has definitely grown in size. When I take that lid off, it smells yeasty, which is just what we want. So that's about 3 hours in, halfway in, and in another few hours, I'll get that baking as well. Okay, I think I'm getting ready to call it. I tasted this not too long ago, just seeing again how the flavor was doing and the salt levels. I did just turn my heat off. It might look like a sloppy soup, but it smells amazing. And once I get all the chunks out, then we'll see what our broth looks like. This did reduce quite a bit. I'm looking at like maybe half volume, possibly even less. Nah, probably about half volume. I think I'm going to grab the chunks of stuff that I can and just put them into this bowl. And then whatever is left, obviously I'm not gonna be able to get all of the pieces, I'm going to put through a fine mesh sieve with a cheesecloth inside, and hopefully that will strain all of the little bits and pieces out and we will be left with just our broth. As I'm removing pieces, I'm realizing obviously displacement happens. So I may have actually quite significantly less broth than I thought, but that's not a problem at all. It just means that that flavor is even more concentrated, and that is what we want. Whoops, my battery just died. Anyway, I wanted to use the clear bowl so that we could see what was going in, but I think this is gonna be a better idea. So I'm gonna just tuck these corners in to hopefully make it a little bit less messy. I imagine we're gonna have some spillage, and I would love to avoid getting broth all over my kitchen. I'm probably not gonna be able to do this all in one go, so let's just see what we have. We've still got some liquid in here. It's very hot. Whew. I really want to get as much of the liquid out of this as I can, but I don't want to burn myself, and this is quite hot. Okay, pause. Okay, what I just did was I dumped out all the scraps and I rinsed out my cheesecloth, and I'm going to repeat this process and basically strain it another time into this empty bowl again, and hopefully that will get out all the last bits that sort of made their way in. It does look like this caught some of the fat, which is kind of interesting. I guess it's already starting to congeal just a little bit as the temperature cools. So as you can see, the broth is quite cloudy, but as I already mentioned, that does not bother me. This is my very first time making stock, and I am not upset about that at all. What I do want to do is take one more taste. I can see there is some sort of gleaming on the top of this, so there is some fat that's going to separate out. Oh, it's really good. Wow, I'm really proud of myself. This is very cool. So, couple things here. The deli containers that I'm gonna freeze this in are plastic, so even though they're like BPA free and whatever, I don't wanna pour like piping hot liquid into them. So I'm gonna let this cool, and while it cools, hopefully some of the fat rises to the top. Maybe it'll congeal, maybe not, but I'm hoping that I can either skim it off, or like I mentioned, I found this trick to use a Ziploc bag as a fat separator. And then once I'm to that stage and everything is ready to go, I am going to pour 2 cups at a time into my measuring cup and get that poured into my deli containers that are gonna go in the freezer. And here is the fruits of my labor. This is so exciting to me. I got just over 5 cups of broth. So now I know basically how much I can get when I fill my large Dutch oven. This is like the largest pot that I have. I don't really have room to store a bigger stock pot, although it would be amazing to be able to save up like 4 or 5 carcasses at once and basically do like double this volume. But we work with what we have, and this is what I have right now. It has been like 6.5, almost 7 hours. And you can see my bread has definitely doubled in size or more. So I am going to get this started, ready to bake. First thing I need to do is put my Dutch oven in my oven to preheat. I'm gonna set the oven to 450 and let the Dutch oven come up to temperature in the oven while the oven heats. And while that's preheating, I'm gonna get some flour down on my counter and turn out my dough and shape it into a ball. To form this into a ball, I kind of just spin it around itself using my hands, and I make sure that any of the really sticky parts have some flour incorporated as well. I don't do a whole lot of kneading, but I move it around enough, I think. And what I usually do is transfer my ball, once I have it formed, onto a piece of parchment paper. And when I'm ready to bake, I basically drop this entire sheet into my Dutch oven and put the lid on that way. In the past, I've used cornmeal on the bottom of my bread. That works, but this actually is a little bit easier to clean up. So I just lift the whole thing in, put it in my pan, and then it's easy for me to pull the bread out when I'm done as well. I just pull the whole thing up. So I'm gonna set this aside, and once my oven comes to temperature, I will get it baked. And then 45 minutes from then, we'll have a beautiful loaf of bread. My oven just came to temp. In that time, I got my kitchen cleaned back up again. My counter's nice and wiped down. So what I'll do is carefully drop my loaf right inside, put my lid back on my bread, and pop this back in the oven. This is gonna go for 30 minutes with the lid on, and then I'll let it go for 15 more minutes once I take the lid off, and that's how we're gonna get that beautiful crunchy, crusty crust. Timer just went off. Our bread is done. This is a beautiful loaf. I am so excited with the way this turned out. I encourage you to try this recipe. Like I said, the recipe is in the description below. So simple, and if you don't think you can bake bread, it turns out you can, I promise. Thank you so much for spending the day in the kitchen with me today. It was so fun to attempt a new skill, and I'm really excited with the way my chicken stock turned out. I definitely want to make more again in the future, and maybe I will get a little bit better as time goes on, but I am really proud of the result that I have, and now we've got 5 cups of chicken stock ready to go in the freezer. Thank you so much for spending time with me today. I am so grateful for you being here. Please consider subscribing if you haven't already done so. It really does help my channel grow and reach new people, and I'm so glad you're here. Thanks for watching. Bye, guys.